WV Uncommonplace. This podcast is a variety podcast that houses numerous series to cover mental health, empowerment, podcast framework, and various intimate theories to get to know the hosts. Along with occasional movies reviews and dives in pop culture with our event podcast episodes. The Uncommonplace digs into bringing guests on that stories don't fit the mold and are very different. WV stands for the great state of West Virginia, and every quarter we cover something in West Virginia. Stacey and myself, JR, are your hosts, so please come along for this venture to Uncommonplace.
Oh man, I love it when we turn on the record button. The red button always makes for a great episode. Well, guys and ladies and everybody else, I am JR, host of West Virginia Uncommonplace, or as we like to dub it, WV Uncommonplace. We still love you, West Virginia, but we just like to make it short. I have with me a special guest. I have a podcaster with me, which this is amazing. It is hard to get brand new people in your ecosystem that are podcasters, because some of us are kind of like me. I have a group of podcasters that run with me. We're not a gang, but we're a group. So when you find someone and they are very interesting, it's an amazing thing to have them on your show. So real quick, without me doing an introduction, I'm going to let her do the introduction she would do from her own show. I want to step back for a moment and I'm going to let her take over. Please introduce yourself the way you do on your show, please.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for having me on. Hey, everybody. This is your girl, Kyra. I am the host and creator of the Vibe Selection podcast. And it is a pleasure to be here with you guys today. I'm excited to discuss whatever we're going to discuss today in this show. And it is a complete honor. My Vibe Selection podcast, I talk about a variety of topics ranging from spirituality, ranging from religion, going into pop culture and entrepreneurship, and so on and so forth. It's just pretty much a smorgasbord of a variety of different topics that I bring to you on a weekly basis. Right now, I'm going to start my new season of the Vibe Selection podcast that should be airing at the end of this month in January. So I'm excited for that. So y'all make sure you go ahead and listen to that on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and everywhere where podcasts are on. So yeah, it's a pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much.
All right, and see, I like that right there. She did the shameless plug without me having to do it for her. So Kyra, here we go real quick. Now, your name, I always like to do this because I'm from I'm from Virginia, but I live in West Virginia, so I got a little bit of accent. I speak real fast sometimes. I'm just like an auctioneer. So spelling your name, Kyra.
Yes.
Me pronouncing it, I say Kyra, and your last name is Mahoney for everybody, so y'all can get that southern twang to it. Now, the question that I ask everyone when they come on the show, who are you? So the vintage question from this show, I need you to, you've already kind of told us who you are and why you're here today. So I'm going to spin this around this way. What inspired you to create the Vibe Selection podcast?
Wow. Okay. So I went to school at San Francisco State University, and they're known for their broadcasting and communications program. So I wanted to be a journalist, a news anchor, essentially. Well, I was in school. I was trying to get internships. It was really challenging getting them. I live in the Bay Area here, and the Bay Area is one of the top markets in the entire world, aside from New York and a few other places that are known for, media, entertainment industry. So it was super hard to land an internship. So I got into this internship class that I took at San Francisco State. And we had all these different type of guests that were coming on. We were talking to executives from Warner Brothers, from Netflix, from Vice Media, from Disney, that were coming in to give us pointers on what we should put on our resume in order to, branch into the broadcasting field. And everyone kept saying the same thing, which was do your own thing. The beauty in being in broadcasting and entertainment is you don't need someone to get whatever it is you're trying to get off the ground. You can go on YouTube. You can get on TikTok and become somebody. You can create your own content. And if these, companies like it enough, they'll pick it up and then you're the next star. So I also had a lot of people encouraging me to just start a podcast. They're like, hey, it's pretty affordable. You can create the type of content you want to create. And that was the biggest thing for me. It was like, what type of content do I want to create is what I was thinking about in my mind. Also, how will I do it? So there was a lot of self-doubt going on there. I was like, how am I going to make money? How do you make money being a podcaster? I'm working as a waitress right now. I don't know, what equipment I need. There was just so many things running through my mind and how I was going to get this podcast off the ground. And during all of this thought process that I had, the pandemic had hit. And in that moment, there was a big wake-up call for me, which was like, okay, you've been making excuses thus far. The pandemic is around, things are shut down, you got laid off your job. Now is the perfect opportunity for you to figure out how to make this happen for yourself. And that's what I did. I went on Google, literally, and Googled what equipment I would need to start a podcast, what hosting sites I would need in order to, distribute my podcast. And then I started thinking about the type of content that I wanted to create, essentially. And at that point in my life, I was really big into spirituality, which I still am. And over the past couple of years, I felt like when I see a lot of things in regards to spirituality, it's like a lot of like cliche stuff. It's like a lot of like Miss Cleo type stuff. And like, there's someone dead, like the Long Island medium, just a lot of just kind of fodder type of stuff. And I really wanted people to understand spirituality in its wholeness, to realize like this isn't something that is demonic or anything like that. I mean, spirituality is in religion, it's in a lot of things. And I know we're in a country where religion is a really big thing for us. So I wanted to have people get a better understanding of what religion and spirituality was and how they're intertwined with one another and how it helped me over in my life, because there was a lot of things that I've experienced in my life over the years, and spirituality and coming into contact with a lot of spiritual healers have helped me to progress this far, where I was able to get my podcast off the ground. So that's how I got started with my podcast.
Okay, and one thing I'm going to give you your flowers on this. Me and you do something that I appreciate in podcasts. We don't stick to just one simple thing. We have multiple genres that we cover. We break them down. We put a division in everything we're doing. But I love that you do that, because one thing that I always hear in podcasting is niche down. And when I find when someone niches down, unless you're doing something that is informative to that point all the time, it gets old, it gets dry. And that's one thing I wanted to tell you that I like. Now, going into that, I want to ask you this. When you're doing these wide range of topics, how do you come up with the themes? How do you decide your planning or your staging for your episodes?
To be honest, I go off of what speaks to me. And that's the beauty about doing this podcast is, if you're on the news or something, you're told what you're going to discuss for that day. You're not writing anything. You're literally regurgitating something that someone else had created for you, because, granted, you have to go through lawyers to make sure what you're saying is accurate and that you actually can say those things on, TV and things like that. And now I have the key to it. I can create all of this. So when I look at a topic, I look at, does this topic speak to me? Is this something that I'm passionate for? Does it resonate with me? Is it something that can help someone else? Because even when I have guests on my show, I'm impressed by a lot of the guests that I have on the show because they've had so many accomplishments. But I also look at how you can give back to my listeners, because people sometimes they get on your show and they talk all about themselves. And obviously they're there to talk about themselves, and you want to learn more about them because you're fascinated with whatever line of duty they're in, whether they're in entertainment or they're an entrepreneur, they're a musician or whatnot. The thing is like, talking about yourself is great, but how can other people be in the position that you're in? That's most important for me. So in terms of content, it's all about what resonates for me. If I don't click with the particular guest, they're not going to be on my show, and so that's what really it all boils down to, what you're passionate about, because the listeners are listening to you because of what you bring to the table and because you're connecting with the content that you're creating. So if you're not creating content that you're passionate about and then you switch it up, you're essentially going to lose that listenership. So that's what it's about, sticking to what resonates with you. And that's how I create my content.
Okay. Now, since you're a podcaster just like me, well, not like me, we're all different, but one thing inside podcasting, the hardest thing for me to learn, and obviously I've got over 500 plus episodes, was how do you develop the intimacy with your audience? And the reason I'm going to ask you this is this. I'm going to put a little filler in here real quick. With me at first, I did these episodes, and like you said, I had guests on. But what I did first was I'm a person. I'm called the master of curation because I look, like you said, at that value that that person has, and I have to take myself out of who J.R. Sparrow is and go into, if I'm a listener, like you said, what does this person bring to me? But how does this person strengthen the relationship between myself and the listener, and then whatever they're offering? Because like you said, keeping that relationship with the listener is more important to me than who's on my show. So I mean, I know it sounds kind of wild, but so how did you develop the intimacy with your listeners?
I think when listeners hear you and your connection with the guests that you have on your show, it just really comes naturally. And the listeners will be able to connect because, have you ever heard a conversation with someone? You may have been out somewhere randomly and you're overhearing the conversation, although you're not in it. And you're like, dang, they got really good chemistry with one another. That's essentially what it's like when it comes to having my audience be able to connect with the guests that I have on the show. And oftentimes before I have guests on the show also, I like to listen to other interviews that they've been on to see kind of how they are when they're being interviewed, if they're open, if you kind of have to pull out a little information for them, how much they're going to give. And then I base all of that off of the questions that I'm going to ask. So if I have someone that is a little bit more challenging to get answers from and is not really, trying to give up any sort of information really, and they're just kind of just trying to be a lot matter of fact, what I will do is I will think about questions that are deeper, and I'll ask questions that can relate back to my audience. And that's typically how I do that, to be able to break the ice and be able to have a listener connect with them.
Okay, I like that. You got a lot of form to you. I might have to sign you to a contract when I become a bigwig somewhere. Or you sign me to a contract.
I've had a lot of practice. I'm not where you are yet.
All right, so in the realm of spirituality, that is something that I liked about your show because I went through like you said, when I listen to someone's show, I usually space my interviews out like what we did so far out that I can actually pay attention to you. And one thing I like about you is you have a real tight authenticity with this spirituality. Everything else is fine too, but my question is, how do you have a balance? How do you integrate those aspects into your discussions about pop culture, entertainment, and other diverse subjects on your show? Because when I hear you talk on your show, you sometimes you put a nice little tight twist on it. Sometimes you're a little loose with it, which we all do because that's how you build your character. So how do you put spirituality, how do you make a balance between that and everything else that you have going on your show?
Oh, it's a work in progress. I feel like I have not completely mastered that as of yet, and I'm still working on it. And so for me, with the connection that I have to each topic that I am discussing for that week, I oftentimes think about, okay, how does this particular topic that I am discussing for this week relate in a spiritual sense? Because there's so much going on in the world right now. I mean, there's so much job loss. People are still recovering from the pandemic. There's a lot of death that's going on. And so when I have a topic that I want to discuss and I try to relate it to spirituality, I always just kind of look at how can this kind of resonate with people? What can they take away? It's really about just in a spiritual sense, it's what can you take away from it? When you're discussing a topic. So for me, it's something that I'm still trying to build. Like when I have musicians on, I'm like, how can I, get a spiritual approach to that? In which I'm still trying to learn how to do that. So, as of right now, it's still kind of a work in progress, but we'll see. I'm sure I'll be able to figure some way to marriage all of that together.
Okay, and please, whatever you do, save the musicians, because that is one thing that I tell every podcaster is a flaw in my book. I have no authenticity in music. Yeah, I'm an R&B lover and stuff like that, but I did a spell where I did a few shows with musicians, and I can't get a value for value from it. So I hope to God, to whomever we need to get those prayers out to, that you can keep that going, because they are some hard people to interview. Now, we have a connection here, deaf doulas, Reikis, psychic mediums, and tarot card readers. Okay, let's just get into it, because that's one of the heavy things.
Oh, I love this.
And my thing is, everyone knows, if you listen to the show, that I suffered a great death in a female that I was with. She passed away in 2019, so everyone knows that, and everybody knows that my spirituality got deeper behind that. And I searched for the deaf doulas. I went and I got more spiritually inclined, I want to say. So, from your show, what are some key takeaways and fascinating insights you've gained from some of these conversations with these psychic mediums and tarot card people or tarot readers and other people of this medium? Because here's my thing, and I'm just going to throw this last bit of filler in there because I always talk too much. It's amazing to find people that have that openness like you do, and that can handle that, because not a lot of people can handle what they're hearing and take this stuff and not be superficial about it. You're not superficial at all. You're perfect in what you do. So tell us a little bit about some takeaways or some fascinating insights that you gained from these conversations.
One of the things that I want your listeners and, people to really understand about psychics, mediums, tarot readers, Reiki healers, is that they're there to help, number one. They're not there to judge. They're only there to give you insight. So when you go to these people and you're asking them questions, or you want to connect with the loved one from the other side, understand that whatever information that they're given, they're usually given in accuracy. Obviously, if you're going to them, I would think you would consider them to be very accurate. But there's also going to be things sometimes that may come up that you may not be ready for or want to touch on, but they're things that need to be told to you. And they're never going to tell you anything that is not for your higher good. And, the other thing is that another takeaway that I try to give a lot of my listeners is, you go to these people because you want the help. You want to know the information. So you can't get mad about whatever the outcome is. So if they're telling you, something that you need to change, I think it's very important for you to reflect on that introspectively and do what it is that you need to do in order to better yourself or your life. But you also, in a world of free will, you have the say-so in what the dynamic is and how things change. Because you can go to a tarot card reader and you ask them the question, right? And the cards will lay out the answer for you. You can always change the outcome of what those cards say. So it may be a relationship, right? And you feel like you want to know about a boyfriend that you've been dating for quite some time, and you want to know if that person should continue to stay in your life. And maybe the cards are telling you this probably isn't a good match for you, right? You may think about this and you may say to yourself, well, you know what? I don't really like what this tarot card reader is saying. I really want to stay with this man that I'm with or this woman that I'm with. So I'm going to continue on and continue to foster this relationship. Well, sometimes in you continuing to foster that relationship, sometimes things may start to change in a good way for you. And then in fostering that relationship, there may be some things that are starting to come up that you're realizing, like, you know what, maybe that tarot card reader was right. Maybe I should actually get out of this relationship, this toxic relationship that I'm in. But when it's all said and done, you have the free will to change your dynamic. A tarot card reader, a psychic can tell you one thing, but if you're changing your perspective and your outcome on things, things will essentially change too. So it's not always about them being wrong or being inaccurate. Sometimes it is you not maybe liking the information that you're given from that particular psychic or tarot reader, and you change the outcome. You can always change the outcome because we live in a world that is all about free will.
Okay, I like that. And that's right there. That's an informative thing. Listeners, whenever you go over to her show and listen, that's what you get from her. That right there. That is the pinnacle. Now, inside this show, I pay homage to a news magazine. It was a TV show, still is a TV show. It's called 2020. David Stossel's on there as a comedic relief. Diane Sawyer was poignant with her interviews, and the late, great Barbara Walters. She made people personable. She made you question how you were feeling about things and what you thought about when that show went off there. So, Kyra, are you ready for your 2020 questions?
Yes, ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, now this is a good part of the show that I like to do. And this right here, I want to give to podcasters real quick. This is a segment that we always do on this show with guests. Segments go a long ways in podcasting. I just want to put that out there. That's just a little side note because it has been a while since I've done a show with a podcaster. So I just like to throw that out there. So your first question is this. Having a podcast that broadcasts both nationally and internationally is very impressive. So I want to give you your flowers on that too, because it's hard to get the show out to the U.S. sometimes.
Yeah.
What challenges and exciting opportunities have arisen from reaching such a wide audience for you?
I think the wonderful feedback that I get from my show, that is the most rewarding, because sometimes, you create content and you're not always sure of it sometimes. You're like, okay, I guess it resonates with me, but like, has it touched anybody else? And to hear that feedback, to know that all of your hard work has paid off is it's wonderful to hear. And to see how it has, even if, and this is for other podcasters, when you're first starting off in podcasting, a lot of times you're not going to go viral right off the bat. That's something that a lot of people really just need to understand and be content with. And that is one thing actually that I was taught a lot in, the internship class that I took at San Francisco State, which was, you're going to get rejected. This is part of the business, but just keep going, because there may be one person who looks over your resume and says, you know what, why hasn't this person has been putting in their resumes for the last 5 years now? And we should go ahead and hire them because I think that their resume is fabulous. But those other 4 people may have looked at that resume and said, I don't like this. I don't think that this person is a good match. So, I say to a lot of people, it's just keep going and do what you do, just knowing that you really enjoy what you do. And to hear, the fact that my podcast is now international and to see how it has brought in, that's a great thing. And even like I said, if it's one person listening to your podcast, if it's a couple of people listening to your podcast, just know that it's touched someone. And that is the most rewarding part about it. It's going to take time for you to start popping, but just know that if you have a passion for it, if you have the drive, just keep going. Because there has never been any success story without failures ahead of the way.
Yes. Now, being a person that has content creation, you cover various things. But one question that never gets asked to a person that does content creation is this simple question that I ask everybody all the time. It's a simple definition I need to come from you real quick. Is what is your definition of success? And the reason that I ask you this is because myself, I've taken a stance that I no longer look at success. I look at an achievement from day to day. If I did something a little different from yesterday, that's a success to me. So I don't need to, build upper echelons and all that other stuff. I need to have goals. I need to always be goal oriented. But success is not going to dwell, So please tell us real quick, what is your definition of success, or if success is not a definition anymore?
I think success is whatever your definition of success is. And that means something very different to everybody, as you just explained your definition of that. For a lot of people, success would be defined as monetary gain, money, sponsorships in the podcasting realm, viewership. For me, success is waking up in the morning to see another day. That's number one. So you can't be successful in life if you aren't around to see another day. That's number one. Number two is being able to do what you do and love what you do. To me, that is my definition of success right now. And that may change. Everybody's, as we evolve as people, our definitions for things start to change over time because we learn and we grow as a person. So with that said, things are going to change in your life. And so for me, right now, success is just being able to stay financially afloat, being able to create the type of content that I want and do this podcasting. So I would say that would be my definition of success.
Okay, and I like that. Now, we're going to do a little role play here because this is what makes you even more personable. Now, you're in California, so let's see. It's been a while since I was in California. Last time I was there was actually on Judge Judy. Don't nobody look up that episode.
Oh, man. Who did you sue? Did they sue you or you sued them?
They sued me.
Oh, no.
Well,
you was on Judge Judy's bad side.
Yes, I was.
She had to smack down that gavel on you.
Yeah, I will have to send you a link to that episode later. Now, here's a hard question or hard thing to go with this role play. Everybody has a certain level of achievement they want to get to. Now, me, for instance, I was able to do something with NPR radio. That was what I wanted to do in podcasting. It was a very minute thing that I did, but I reached that goal inside of podcasting because I don't know anybody that's on our level of podcasting that's done anything with NPR. So once I reached that level, I was like, man, I made it, at least in that part. Now I've got other goals that, I'm trying to get somewhere in one of these hosting places and be an executive somewhere to help other people. But, the other goal, because we're actually motivational speakers, we didn't know it, is this thing called a TED Talk. A TED Talk to me is the next thing I want to do in life. And I don't know if that's something you want to do, but let's role play with this. So you're in California. They decided to send you to the University of California at Riverside, which is a decent school, and it's a school that's affiliated with me. Mm-hmm. And you're there to do a TED Talk on podcasting and its future. Walk me through it.
Oh, wow. This is great. I love this question. So to be honest with you, I don't typically listen to TED Talks. So I don't really know what the setup is for that or how they kind of go about that. But I will do my best to improvise right now.
Go ahead.
So the future of podcasting is that it looks as though it will continue to thrive, but it's going to be a little different this time. With AI being one of the biggest things right now, I feel like the nature of podcasting is going to go and have AI-generated podcasters. But I also think we could work together with a lot of these AIs in order to create magic. The thing is right now, in so many different realms of jobs right now, people are having their jobs being taken over by a lot of these AIs. But it doesn't have to be us against these AIs. What it could be is all of us working together cohesively, because I think that that's how the world is really supposed to be and what we've been trying to advance to for so long. But a lot of times we don't allow natural selection to happen as it should. There's a lot of pushback that we have when things are being brought to the forefront that we may feel threatened by or that we don't agree by. However, if we work alongside these AIs, I think that we can create a lot of magic within the future of podcasting. Right now, they're starting to create a lot of AI news anchors right now. So people look at that as, oh, they're going to take us out of the market. Right now, when it comes to news anchors right now, there are a lot of people who were the camera people that are having their jobs being taken over because, we have the drones that can capture all of this. So you don't really need a full film crew to go out there and actually record any of this anymore. But I think that there is a way for all of us to work together, whether that be behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, in order to work cohesively with AIs.
Okay. Now, in a TED Talk, you did something there. You made evergreen content with what you just said there. So maybe in the future, if you got like 20 minutes, don't watch a full TED Talk. But if
I've never been able to get into those.
But what you did right there, you did evergreen content. So that right there is it. So you did a TED Talk, and I appreciate that. Now, from the West Coast, we bring you over to the East Coast, and over the East Coast, we have prominent places. You could go to New York, Baltimore, wherever you want to go. But we're going to just pick somewhere nice, Boston. Boston, you're at the University of Massachusetts, UMass, which is fairly prestigious. And it's a podcast convention that you're hosting instead of a TED Talk, because you did your TED Talk, made your money from that. Now it's time to get over into what you do best, podcasting. So what advice would you give to aspiring podcasters, and what level would you teach them that they have to have inside of authenticity? And the reason I say a level, because everybody has authenticity. I don't take it away from everybody. But some people, you can see a difference sometimes from interview to interview. More or less, let's say more or less, it's more of an integrity thing. So what would that conversation be like to these podcasters,
So my conversation with the podcasters would be, think about what it is that really drives you and motivates you when it comes to podcasting. Really think about where you want your future to be, but also don't follow anyone's blueprint. I would say that would actually be number one. A lot of times when people are motivated to do something, they often are inspired by other people to do them. Also by their own inspiration, obviously, because it's something that they want to do. But a lot of times people mess up and follow other people's blueprint, and then they wonder why they don't have the same outcome of success that the people that they're inspired to be like have. And that's because you have to remember, you need to follow your own blueprint. And in your journey in life, you will ultimately figure that out. It's not going to be when you think that it's going to be. It may take you 4 years, 5 years. It may take you 10 years to figure out what your full blueprint is. But know that that is part of your journey. So if you don't see success within a year, because you have so many people now, they're telling you, become an entrepreneur, screw a 9 to 5, you can make thousands of dollars doing this while you're working for someone else. And if you don't see, the success in the time that you're a failure, and all these things that are being said when you listen to social media. So a lot of people have this insecurity when it comes to success, especially, is that if you don't see it within a certain time frame, that means that you're not successful. But just know, in your journey and finding your own blueprint, it's going to take time. And everybody's timeline is different.
Okay, and I like that. And I thank you. So you finished off our 2020 questions. Oh. And that right there, they got the podcast ready. That's that journalist right there that they got through all that. I don't know if you've seen it, but I heard it and felt it.
Oh, yes.
So in tying everything up, the question the next set of questions we have to go to are directly from an old series that I had, which was called Podcast Collide. It's where I would take your podcast and my podcast, we put them together, and we would make a show talking about your show, relating it to my show. We do a lot of basically a correlation. Sadly, that ended because we go through phases and changes. So I'd like to ask you a few Podcast Collide questions, if you don't mind, just for podcasters. All right. So what is the hardest thing to accept in podcasting?
That you're not going to make money right away. You're probably going to have to get a regular job.
Yes. Now, the next question I have is something that I had to deal with. And yes, I'm an old man. I'm 38 years old. Is the support. I didn't realize how much unseen, unheard support I had in podcasting. Mm-hmm. Because we were always taught that when you see support should be out in the open in certain areas. But in podcasting, you would assume that it would be out in the open. You wouldn't think that something I do for podcasters after I listen to your show, I usually have to get 25 episodes in. I share their podcast on my Instagram story. I share them out on another place that I told you about that I do with my listener migration program, which is Snapchat. I put people's shows in locations because I'm like this. You're on the West Coast, I'm on the East Coast. We have different audiences, but man, you might have a better show than mine. Let's get that show out here and let's get listeners to it. It's all about the execution of helping someone get their show out, without any reciprocity, because they don't have to do it for me. I'm not looking for that. I'm not looking for any superlative or any reward. It's just the fact that you're out there podcasting, you're giving your voice, and you're doing that. So to you, has it been hard, like with some of the support when you first started, like people not showing up in the way that you thought they should for support, or did people just show up automatically?
To be honest, I am completely blessed when it comes to that. If I could just be completely transparent, I've had the most amazing guests on my show, whether they be just, regular guests or actual podcasters on my show that have been so gracious enough to lift a helping hand. And I just want to say, just in this moment, since we're discussing it, thank everybody. Thank you, especially, for lending me a helping hand and making the show so great. Because yes, the show is great with me being the podcaster because it's my show, but also having these guests on to relay their stories and, being able to have those stories resonate with my listeners. I feel like that is just the icing on the cake for me.
Okay, and I like that. Now, here's the last question. Now, we're all huge critics of ourselves. So you know what this question is about to be. Being the hardest critic of yourself, like me, for instance, I have a certain pedigree, and I hate to use that word, but it's a certain pedigree and a certain way that I want to handle questions. And it's, I want to be the podcasting version of Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley, when I was growing up, to me, and even to this day, is the greatest when it comes to just interviews being poignant and getting straight to, I hate that I'm pointing, but getting straight to the heart of the person. So that's what I strive to be sometimes. And then I'm J.R. Sparrow, my own character, the country, urban cowboy, whatever they call me. I'm all that. But the point that I'm trying to get here is that how do you handle yourself? Not the imposter syndrome, but how do you handle yourself when you give yourself criticism? Not the imposter syndrome. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the criticism you give yourself, like after you do an interview, like, man, I dropped the ball because I didn't ask that question. How do you handle that?
For me, I just think that I did the best that I could in that moment. And I have to, and I mean, this is something that I do struggle with, not beating myself up. And I think that's something that a lot of people just naturally deal with, is we're our harshest critics because we want to do so well and we want to make sure that things are right. But just know sometimes you may have a question that you think about after the interview is finished and you're like, man, why didn't I ask that question? Or you may listen to the episode back and you may think like, man, I should have said this different or did this different. But just know that whatever it was that you said in that moment, you were supposed to say it in that moment and let it be. And it's not the end. You can also have those guests back on your show and you can ask those questions. And then you can, reach out to some of these people that you've had on your shows, ask them the questions, and then relay it back in a different show, So that's just one thing that I would say is just think about, you said what you were supposed to say in that moment because that's what you were supposed to say, and not beat yourself up about it because you can't turn back the hands of time. You can only move forward.
Okay. Now, audience, I do want to let you know that you will be getting something before this episode comes out. And I don't even know I said before, because you will get a TikTok interview. Ooh. So I'm going to leave a little bit over there. But the last thing I want to do is, if anybody you want to give a special shout out to or thank you that has helped you along the way, or an item, because I've had guests one that told me that if it wasn't for the extra piece of headphone that they've had in their ear to catch what they were saying, they wouldn't be as good as they are. So please give us a big shout out to whoever or whatever has helped you along the way.
I want to give a huge shout out, number one, to all of my listeners and my new listeners, because I know I'm going to garner a couple of listeners after this episode. No, just kidding. But I want to thank especially my listeners. Without you, I wouldn't have gotten as far as I have. And just know that, sometimes when people they get in these spaces where they're podcasters and they're doing so well, or they're influencers or whatever, sometimes we could forget to give back to the fans and thank the fans, because they are the ones that keep us going. They're the ones keeping us afloat at the end of the day, and they are very important. And it's always important to give back to them. And I also want to thank the universe. Yes. Thank you so much, honey. You have helped me so much along the way, with you continuing to guide me through this process, the ever-ending process that I'm, going through right now. You are the glue that's keeping me together. And so I want to thank the universe and my guides and my guardian angels.
Okay, and I like that. Now, since you're a podcaster and I'm a podcaster, everybody knows how I end my show. I just say, I'm JR, whoever the guest is, then we sign off. But I need you to take the reins real quick. Can you end the show for us?
Yes, absolutely. Well, once again, I am Kyra, the host and creator of the Vibe Selection Podcast. I want to thank you all so much for tuning in to another wonderful episode. And may you all tune in for next week's episode. Make sure y'all stay safe, and stay healthy out there. Bye.
That was awesome.
Please follow WV Uncommonplace on Instagram, Tumblr, Twitter, TikTok, where we have some great content, Facebook, LinkedIn. Hit up the merch store at uncommonplace.square.site. Join the email list from the website, and rate, subscribe, and give feedback from your favorite podcatcher. And lastly, thanks for listening, and tune into the next episode.